Hello and welcome back to my channel where I share painting time lapses and top oil painting tips. Today, I'd like to share a piece that took me a bit longer than usual. This was a commissioned portrait, and while I am thrilled with the final product, the process was definitely a journey, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about self-doubt as a painter. Also, how that can crop up when trying to capture a likeness and what to do about it. As you can see in this painting, I lay down an initial wash with a couple of transparent pigments plus Gamsol. I wipe that down so it's less wet and runny, and then immediately get to work sketching out my portrait. For the sketch, I had thinned out my paint, but only to a minimal degree so the lines would stand out a bit. Then I jump into color, which I think was probably a mistake because you'll quickly see my drawing was off, and that meant I wasted some of that earlier time filling in color that I just wound up having to paint over. From this point, I'm basically battling to continue to improve the drawing while also continuing back to that question of color pretty frequently. The portrait was a bit of a challenge in that the subject was in shadow for a great deal of her face, and rather than looking like a light pink or beige like you would imagine her skin tone would, a lot of her face was a fairly gray-brown, which as a painter, at least in my experience, your brain just doesn't want to believe that that could be right. And I find that those neutral colors are more of a challenge. So for almost the rest of this painting, I'm going back and trying to figure out this color problem while also refining shapes. There's a lot of hashing and rehashing though, which I think is helpful to see because even professional artists abandon efforts. They wipe down areas or paint over them when they aren't up to their standards. I think there's a pretty common anecdote about Sargent routinely wiping away portions of his canvases. So while you watch this process, I wanted to talk about this question of doubt or artist block or having to just start over and what that means and how that can sometimes come when trying to capture a likeness and how to make sure you create a piece that not only looks beautiful, it looks like the subject you were commissioned to paint. I think this anxiety can strike regardless of the type of painting, but as a portrait painter, likeness is the place where it crops up for me. The more I work on these types of projects, though, the more I feel that I've gotten into a rhythm and have found ways to keep painting productively, and those are what I was really excited to share with you today. When it comes to likeness for a client, don't be afraid to use every tool to your advantage. This is my first lesson learned / piece of advice. I routinely took pictures of this painting and superimposed it in Photoshop over the original image to check how accurate my drawing was. This won't help me when I'm painting in front of a model or for a personal piece or I'm outside painting a landscape on plein air. But for client work, I don't want to hold myself to some lofty artistic ideal at the expense of delivering a piece that's perfect in the eyes of my client in a timely manner. A lot of people will talk about tools like Photoshop or tricks to help you see better as crutches. And I think for a beginner painter, they absolutely can be. That being said, if it's used sparingly and you understand why it's being used, it can be a really big help. And this is why I wanted to talk about that lofty ideal, this idea that as an artist, as a painter, we see the drawing, we see the errors, or we just don't make them, and we see them quickly without any assistance. I think painting from a model or going outside to paint, it really can help you see better. But that doesn't mean you can't occasionally use something that helps you catch those errors faster. And using Photoshop, it doesn't do the painting for you. You still have to see the gap between your drawing and your reference. I guess building onto this is this idea of using photographs in the first place. A lot of artists would object to painting from photographs at all, or at least painting from them on a regular basis. But what I find with painting children or painting a large family where everyone is spread out across the country, I would have to turn down a lot of commissions if I refused to work from photos. That being said, for the amount of time that I spend working from a photo or I check my drawings using Photoshop, I try to temper that with drawing from life. And I think as a painter, if you're concerned about, these things becoming crutches, the solution is simply find more opportunities to paint and draw from life. Try to do it more often than you're working from a photo. When these boxes have been checked off, I don't think those concerns about crutches, quote unquote, should really bother you anymore. Second thing, as a painter, you'll always be able to fuss with some detail or hold yourself to a standard that is just beyond your current ability. Always. Check out Ira Glass's video on the talent gap to learn more of what I'm talking about. I'll link that below, but as an artist, basically your taste will always exceed what you're currently able to produce. So don't hold a project indefinitely so you can deliver to your client what you think you might be capable of in 10 years. Finish the piece to the best of your current ability, and deliver it on time. Segueing off of that, or dovetailing off of that, the third thing I have here is that perfectionism is not about standards, it's about anxiety. It's a similar point to what I just said, but perfectionism, it isn't some badge of honor, nor is it a reflection of your quality as an artist. It's a fear of inadequacy. Let your painting be done and come to peace with that reflecting your current skill level. Fourth thing, on a tactical level, I've found that it helps to have multiple projects to cycle through at any given time. I try and work on any open project a little bit every day. But this was the first in a series of 3 pieces that I had for this project. And it took me twice as long as the rest because I kept trying to make huge progress in marathon sessions. That also meant that I would kind of avoid picking this piece up at the same time because I had such big, intimidating goals about getting it done. The next 2 pieces, however, I looked at for just a few minutes every day, and they developed much more quickly. This may not work for every artist, as the technical considerations of working a little bit every day are dependent upon the painting style. But for me, I found that it makes a big difference in terms of staying productive and feeling like I've made progress and crushing that self-doubt and the pressure of trying to get a piece done. The reason this is such a big help is that, let's say I put in about half an hour on this portrait. And then I reach a point where I'm just not seeing the improvements I need to make as easily. I might kind of feel stumped and just stare at the piece. This is the point where I would probably put this piece away, grab another painting, shift gears, because typically when I first pull a piece out to begin work on it, that's when I'm seeing a lot of things that I can do. After I've been staring at it for a while, though, those impressions tend to get stale and it's hard for me to figure out what needs to happen next. So having multiple pieces going at once and working in short bursts helps me to really stay productive. Again, this is dependent upon the way in which you work. Some alla prima painters strive to have paintings finished in a single sitting. And I certainly do too. But I'm having to be patient with myself and kind of meet in the middle, at least for right now. Back to the painting. Finally, I reached a place where I achieved the level of finish, the colors, and the drawing that I was after. There were a few details that I added off camera after a final review with the client, but before long, we were ready for varnish and for framing. As usual, the varnish I use can be found in my full supply list, which I'll link in the description below. And here's the final piece. Coming up next, I have 2 additional portraits that were part of this project, so be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching.